Is Cyberpunk 2077 a disappointment? Now, before you jump in my comments and say, yes, it's a buggy mess, or no, it just released, give it some time, hear me out. Because I'm not here to show you 3 hours worth of gameplay with specific examples of all the good and the bad, using complex interwoven storylines fueled by artistic criticism and praise for the minute details. All so I can get across a point that probably won't sway you anyways. I will leave that to the professionals.
I'm a witcher.
No, I'm here to present the question, is Cyberpunk 2077 a disappointment? And to indirectly answer that question by answering these questions. What makes a game disappointing? When is something overhyped? And do myths and legends make for better games than the existence of a release date? Trying to quantify fun is effectively impossible, as annoying as it is. Sure, there's a lot of ways to jokingly do it, but I want to make it clear that this is not supposed to be a comedic video, which is probably hard to believe considering I look like this. I may throw in some jokes here and there, sure, but at the end of the day, I'm not making this video for a laugh or even for views. I really, really care about this topic. I suppose the best place to start is with a little bit of background. CD Projekt Red is a company you probably know pretty well if you've played the Witcher series, especially if you got my Joseph Anderson joke earlier. They're a Polish game company who has made 10 games since 2007, 9 of which are all set in the Witcher universe, and the last one is, of course, you guessed it, Cyberpunk 2077. 2077 is an open-world RPG FPS based on an old tabletop role-playing game called Cyberpunk, which was interestingly also called Cyberpunk 2020 and Cyberpunk Red in later editions. It all just kind of works out in a neat way. For the most reductive of explanations for anyone who just doesn't get it, D&D but in the future. It should be noted that cyberpunk is also used as a term to define a specific genre, of which Cyberpunk, the tabletop game, along with its video game adaptation, certainly fit. If I remember correctly, the tabletop game actually helped coin the phrase cyberpunk. Anyways, long delayed story short, the game was announced in 2012, teased in 2013, had a gameplay reveal in 2018. In 2019, it was announced that it would be releasing in April 2020, which was later delayed to September 2020, which was later delayed to November 2020, and which finally actually really released in December 2020. Development hell doesn't even really feel like an accurate description of what this game went through. It did not set itself a Duke Nukem fate of constant death and rebirth. The press didn't tear it to shreds. Fans didn't make jokes about it like Half-Life 3. If anything, seemingly every person in the world wanted this game to be a masterpiece, and the general populace took it in stride every time a stark yellow flag waved on their dark mode Twitter timeline. But are we really surprised? For every delay and piece of cut content that we heard about, we in turn got a dope-ass Run the Jewels song and Keanu Reeves being fucking Keanu Reeves.
You're breathtaking!
I would argue that this game has received more press and buzz than any game of the last 2 to 5 years, maybe even longer. And now it's out, and with so many people complaining and answering yes to the question phrased in the title of this video, it makes you wonder. Yet again, hypothetical inquiries I place upon my own plate make devouring the meal that much more difficult. How on earth can I enjoy the first course when I filled up on the free breadsticks, or to say it like less of a pretentious asshole, how can game enjoy if already burnt out on game before game even play? The hype train only rolls around the station for the big shit. New Smash reveals, reviving an old series, and that's only sometimes, and those big AAA titles that just make you go, fuck, that's cool. Cyberpunk is one such game. And not just for everyone else, me too. Because before this game was even a thing that we knew about, I have been endlessly fascinated with the cyberpunk genre. I literally want to make enough money to have a custom-themed cyberpunk room and wardrobe, and I am not kidding. But even to step outside of my personal bias for a second, this game was hyped to the moon and back, and then back to the moon, and then back here, and then back to the moon, and then back again, and then kind of just keep doing that until the inevitable heat death of the universe. Every trailer, every promise, every Keanu, the music, the city, the scope, the tits, the murder, the dong, the lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. It felt seemingly perfect. Like Cyberpunk 2077 was the start of the future of gaming. In these months, years even, I have heard less than a handful of people say they thought the game just looked okay, let alone to hear anyone say they actively thought it looked bad. But when is all this hype too much? We got to a point right before the game came out where creators were anti-hyping hard, reminding us things like it's just a game, etc, etc. And I'm not saying these people did anything bad or wrong, I'm just saying that it felt very odd and foreign to me. I feel as though I personally do a really good job of keeping my hype in check. Yeah, sure, there is excitement in this tiny little pink meat sack I have, but I don't go into any game nowadays expecting it to be the new greatest thing I've ever played. I learned my lesson on that one back in 2013.
This is a joke. I like these in time for most of the gameplay. I just think the story is ass. Sony, please bring back Cyberpunk. I will give you all my money, fucking please.
But I have to remember that I'm not everyone, and many people have a hard time hyping responsibly, which led the internet to go from, this is cool, to, Cyberpunk is gonna be the greatest game ever made, and if it doesn't solve my depression and cure world hunger, it will be the worst thing that happened in all of 2020, and that's fucking saying something. Oh, fuck. At some point, it stopped being about the game itself, and it felt more like a ghost story or a tall tale. And when the game came out in the sorry state it did, it makes you ask, Cyberpunk was overhyped. I would venture to say at this point that that is less of an opinion and more so a fact. But overhyped doesn't mean bad. It doesn't even mean disappointment. It just means that a large amount of the player base probably drank too much of the Kool-Aid and went in on launch day with an upset stomach. Some saw characters T-posing, some saw trees go through the walls, some people kept having crashes, some people couldn't even get the application to start. But even so, some people did play, are playing. I've experienced some bugs myself, don't get me wrong, but I have essentially been perfectly fine for the better 95% of my current 20+ hour playtime. Of the people who are actually playing Cyberpunk, it seems like a lot of them are just saying that it's downright not a good game. The glitches are unforgivable and make it unplayable. It's clearly unfinished, and even the parts that aren't unfinished are just not fun. The main story sucks, the driving is bad, it looks like shit, the side content's not good, the gunplay's not good, it goes on and on. Now personally, I disagree. I find the gameplay to be extremely satisfying. The driving is some of my favorite, if not my very favorite in any game I've ever played. The hacking is great, the stealth is fucking awesome, the side missions are sick as hell. The main story has personally been my favorite part so far. I could literally just walk around Night City for hours without doing missions and I would be perfectly content. But all that said, does it matter? Does it matter if the game is good? Could this game ever have been good enough? Do myths and legends make for better games than the existence of a release date? Did the hype go so far because the idea of what 2077 represented meant more to people than what the game could and would ever be? I joked about it earlier, but it's the same way I feel about Half-Life 3. They can never make that game. Nothing it could ever do would make it feel anywhere close to worth it. The meme has become more valuable than the amount of sales or enjoyment that game could ever bring. And to throw it away on something that can factually never live up to its namesake is both socially expensive and downright foolish. And this is something Valve knows. Obviously, they don't need another source of income. But keeping the bit alive is free press that will join Cyberpunk's hype on its endless trips to the moon. It's difficult for me to stand up here in front of you and say Cyberpunk is good because that is both relative and subjective. But what I can say is that Cyberpunk 2077 was always going to be the golden calf created by these social media Israelites, because as much as you may have wanted to worship it, it is but a false prophet. 2077 is not specifically the future of gaming. It's just another big AAA FPS RPG open world game, and a damn good one at that. And I understand it may not have been what you wanted and that the bugs may be frustrating, but if this is not good enough, then I ask you what your merit of good game even is. If this is not something that you're happy with, then disappointment's kind of a tricky thing, because it's not really quantifiable on any level other than personal. Maybe you're disappointed with the story, or the voice acting, or the gameplay, or the fact that the game doesn't even work. This piece of cake is a lot like Cyberpunk 2077. Delicious and full of bugs. Oh my god, did you actually put bugs in this?
Yeah.
Why?
It said so in the script.
It wasn't. Jokes aside, this game is actually kind of a broken piece of shit. There are literally people who just didn't, and I'm sure still don't, get to play the game because of how fucking broken it is. The bugs and glitches have been so bad, especially for people playing on console. And I get that people are frustrated and angry, and they have all their rights to be. But the militia of cyber psychos prancing around the Twitter sphere, screaming about how, oh, Cyberpunk will never be able to be redeemed because it's too broken, need to shut the fuck up. The internet is so goddamn consistent, it makes me want to off myself by paying some merc a bunch of eddies to put lead in my pencil, and not in the fun way. You know what game was a horribly buggy mess at launch? Fucking Skyrim. Skyrim, a game that I don't like, but everyone else seems to believe is one of the greatest pieces of shit ever taken. A game you can play on pretty much every console ever made, from the Switch, to the PlayStation 5, to the Stadia, to the myriad of Xbox consoles with names so similar they sound like a bunch of fucking inbreds, to the fucking Virtual Boy. You can play this classic masterpiece wherever you want, whenever you want, and nobody ever talks about how it was such a buggy piece of shit. Nobody cares. And please allow me to be Sojiro Sakura for a second fan.
Let me explain.
Because I'm not saying we should all hate Skyrim. I do kind of believe that, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that big games like this will often be a glitchy mess at launch. And I don't think we have to just accept that without criticism, but I think it's too early 2 days in to say, fuck the game, it can't be fixed, it can never be fixed no matter what. What makes a game disappointing is not getting what you want. And the best way to stop that from happening is to temper your expectations and hype responsibly, and to be patient for the developers to fix all of the inevitable issues that happen at launch. And when talking about the game, feel free to bring them up and to complain. But to write off a game forever because it's having issues, albeit serious ones, is not a failing on the game itself, it is a stubbornness within you. I am not a Cyberpunk apologist. I think the game probably needed more time. There are things about it that I don't like really don't like. But I don't live in a reality where it got more time, so I'm going to speak on the facts of the reality in which I do exist. Cyberpunk 2077, so far, is an amazing game with a lot of problems, but problems does not a worthless game make. It needs time to work as intended, as many AAA games do. And it may or may not cement itself as an icon of the medium for years to come, but it is too early to tell. Is Cyberpunk 2077 a disappointment? Not if you ask me. But history is not written by the moderates, it's written by the loudest, most radical section of the masses, and with that in mind, I fear for this game and to see if this amazing piece of art will be able to get the praise it deserves by the time it's actually the year 2077. I really hope it does. Because deep down, when you look past all the bugs and glitches, this game is something special. Perhaps a downright masterpiece. And I hope everyone else can see that too. Thank you.